Number 10. Snow blindness. Picture reaching for your water bottle and realizing you can no longer see your own hands. That is what snow blindness does, and it can happen in a single afternoon. Snow blindness is basically a sunburn on the surface of your eyes. Up at Everest's altitude, the air is thin, and sunlight bouncing off endless white snow carries far more ultraviolet radiation than anything you would feel at the beach. A few hours with your goggles off or with a cracked lens, and the clear front layer of the eye gets scorched. The cruel part is that you feel nothing at the time. The pain arrives hours later, often after dark, when a climber's already high on the mountain and a long way from any help. It usually strikes on the wide open stretches above Camp 2, where there is nothing but glare in every direction. The real threat is not losing your sight, it is where that leaves you. A climber who suddenly cannot see at 26,000 feet, cannot find the fixed ropes, cannot judge the edge of a drop, and cannot move fast enough to stay warm. The British expeditions of the 1920s ran into this constantly. Porters who lost their goggles had to be led down by hand, one slow step at a time. These days, climbers carry spare goggles for this exact reason, but goggles fog, freeze, and get knocked loose in the wind, and on summit day, people get careless. The good news is that snow blindness heals in a day or two. The bad news is that on Everest, one day of being helpless in the open is often all it takes to start a far worse chain of events. On its own, it rarely kills. It is simply the first domino. Number 9. Falling rocks. Most people imagine Everest as a world of pure ice and snow. They forget about the rock, and the rock is what comes loose and falls without warning. Large parts of the climb cross steep faces of stone and frozen scree, especially the Lhotse face and the rocky bands near the high camps. As the sun warms the mountain through the morning, the ice that holds everything in place begins to melt, and rocks that were frozen solid suddenly let go. Some are the size of a fist, some are the size of a car. A fist-sized rock falling from hundreds of feet above hits with enough force to crack a helmet and snap a neck. The danger is made worse by the climbers themselves. When dozens of people are clipped to the same rope, a single boot can kick a stone loose onto everyone below, and there is nowhere to dodge while tied to a fixed line on a sheer face. Helmets help, and good teams move through the worst zones early in the morning while the mountain is still frozen and stable. But timing is everything, and a traffic jam or a slow climber can leave people stuck in a rockfall zone exactly when the sun starts loosening things up. In recent years, guides have reported more rockfall than ever because warmer temperatures are melting ice that used to stay locked in place all year. You can wear the best helmet in the world, against the wrong rock at the wrong moment, it simply is not enough. Number 8. Crevasse Falls. Some of the most dangerous ground on Everest is the part that looks completely flat and harmless. A glacier is not solid ice sitting still. It is a frozen river, slowly grinding downhill, and as it moves, it tears open deep cracks, called crevasses. Many of them are hundreds of feet deep. The terrifying thing is that fresh snow blows across the top and forms a thin bridge that hides the gap underneath. From above, it looks like smooth, safe snow. Step on the wrong spot, and the bridge gives way, and a climber drops into a dark slot in the ice with walls of solid blue on either side. This is the constant threat in the western CWM, and especially in the Khumbu Icefall, the broken maze of glacier near the bottom of the climb. Teams cross the worst sections on aluminum ladders, lashed together and laid flat over the gaps. Climbers clip in and walk across them in heavy boots and crampons, balancing over a drop they cannot see the bottom of. Falling into a crevasse can be survivable if you are roped to your team and they catch the fall quickly, but the ice can wedge a person tight, or the fall can knock them unconscious, and hauling a limp body out of a deep crevasse at altitude is brutally slow work. People have died this way, sometimes when a snow bridge collapsed and there was no rope holding them at all. The ground that kills here is the ground that never looks dangerous. Number 7. The Khumbu Icefall. If you ask the Sherpas which part of Everest scares them the most, many will point to the very beginning, a place most people think of as just the warm-up. The Khumbu Icefall sits right above base camp, and it is a frozen waterfall the size of a city, made of giant blocks of ice called seracs. Some of these towers are as big as houses. Because the glacier is always moving, these blocks shift, lean, and eventually collapse, and there is no way to know exactly when. When a serac the size of a building lets go, it brings down everything below it in a roaring wall of ice. Climbers cannot avoid this zone because it is the only practical way onto the mountain from the south. To limit the risk, teams cross it in the freezing hours before dawn, when the ice is most stable, moving fast and not stopping. But the Sherpas who fix the ropes and carry the loads cross it dozens of times a season, so they spend far more time in the danger than the clients ever do. On the morning of April 18, 2014, a huge serac released without warning, just as a line of Nepali guides was moving through with heavy loads. 16 of them were killed in seconds. It was, at the time, the deadliest single accident in the history of the mountain. There was no rescue to attempt, only the grim work of recovery. The disaster led the Sherpa community to leave the mountain that season, and it forced the whole industry to face how much of the risk fell on the people doing the hardest work. Number 6, frostbite. There is a reason so many famous Everest survivors are missing fingers, toes, and parts of their face. That reason is frostbite, and it does its work quietly. When your body gets dangerously cold, it makes a brutal decision. It pulls blood away from your hands, feet, and face to protect your heart, lungs, and brain. Those outer parts get sacrificed. First, the skin goes numb, then waxy and pale, and then the fluid inside the cells actually freezes, and the tissue begins to die. In the wind and cold of the upper mountain, this can begin within minutes if a glove comes off or a boot is not warm enough. Frostbite by itself usually does not kill a person on the spot. What it does is take away their ability to function. A climber with frozen hands cannot grip the rope, cannot open their pack, cannot manage their own oxygen. Frozen feet cannot walk. Once a climber can no longer move themselves, high on the mountain, they are in real trouble because nobody can simply carry them down. The clearest example is Beck Weathers, who was caught in the 1996 disaster and left for dead in the snow, not once, but twice. He survived, but the cold destroyed his right hand, the fingers of his left hand, and his nose. Stories like his are common up here. Frostbite is rarely written down as the cause of death, but it sits constantly in the background, turning a hard descent into an impossible one. Number 5, oxygen system failure. Most people who climb Everest are not breathing the mountain's air at all. They are breathing from a bottle, and when that system fails, the clock starts running fast. At the summit, the air holds only about a third of the oxygen you would get at sea level. The body cannot survive up there for long, which is why most climbers use bottled oxygen through a mask and regulator. It does not make the mountain easy, but it keeps the brain working and the body warm enough to keep moving. Take it away suddenly, and a climber who felt strong a moment ago can turn slow, clumsy, and confused within minutes. These systems fail in ordinary, frustrating ways. Regulators freeze shut, masks ice over with frozen breath, bottles run empty sooner than expected when a climber is moving slowly and burning through more than planned. Sometimes a cache left for the way down is gone, already used by someone else. During the 1996 tragedy, oxygen problems were woven all through the disaster. Climbers ran low while stuck high on the mountain, and without that lifeline, their bodies cooled, and their judgment slipped at the worst possible time. A bottle is a simple thing, but in the death zone, it is the difference between walking down and sitting down. The hard truth is that even a perfect oxygen setup can fail in the cold, and when it does, there's no spare lung to fall back on. Number 4, sudden storms. Everest can offer a clear blue summit morning and a deadly whiteout on the same afternoon, and the gap between them can be less than an hour. The mountain is tall enough to reach into the jet stream, the band of ferocious wind that circles the planet. When the weather shifts, it can shift violently. Temperatures crash, visibility drops to nothing, and the wind chill reaches a level the human body cannot tolerate for long. The worst part is the timing. Storms often build in the afternoon, which is exactly when tired climbers are strung out across the upper mountain on their way down from the summit. That is the story of the 1996 disaster, the one made famous by the book Into Thin Air. On May 10th, a number of climbers reached the summit far later than they should have, and as they descended, a storm rolled in and swallowed the upper mountain. Rob Hall, one of the most respected guides in the world, became trapped near the south summit with his exhausted client, Doug Hansen. He stayed with him and made heartbreaking radio calls home before the cold took him. Scott Fisher, another expedition leader, died as well. So did Yasuko Namba. 8 people lost their lives in that single storm. When the weather turns like that, rescue from the top of the mountain is essentially impossible. Helicopters cannot fly that high in those conditions, and no rescuer can reach the upper slopes in a whiteout and hurricane wind without dying too. The storm does not just trap climbers, it locks the door behind them. Number 3, HAPE and HACE. Two of the deadliest things on Everest are completely invisible. They happen inside the body, and by the time they are obvious, a climber may have only hours left. Both come from the same root problem, which is the lack of oxygen at extreme altitude. The first is high-altitude pulmonary edema, or HAPE. In plain terms, fluid leaks into the lungs and slowly fills them up. The climber becomes breathless even while resting, coughs up froth, and begins to drown from the inside while standing out in the open air. The second is high-altitude cerebral edema, or HACE, and it is even more frightening. Here the brain itself begins to swell. The climber loses coordination and stumbles as if drunk. Their thinking turns foggy and strange. Some get confused enough to sit down in the snow or even take off their clothing, with no idea they are dying. These conditions can appear over a single night, and they can kill within hours if nothing changes. The one true cure is simple to say and hard to do, which is to get down to lower altitude immediately. Bottled oxygen, certain drugs, and a sealed pressure bag can buy time, but they are only stopgaps. The mountain does not always allow a fast descent, and a climber whose brain is swelling often cannot help with their own rescue. It is why so many people who die high on Everest are last seen behaving strangely, sitting calmly, where no clear-thinking person would ever stop. Number 2, exhaustion and exposure on the descent. Almost everyone pictures the summit as the dangerous part. The truth is nearly the opposite. Most people who die on Everest die on the way down, after the photo is already taken and the body has nothing left. Reaching the top takes everything a climber has. They are oxygen-starved, badly dehydrated, and often awake for more than a day straight. The descent is supposed to be the reward, but it is when the body finally breaks. A climber sits down to rest for just a moment, and in the cold of the death zone, that moment becomes permanent. The muscles will not answer, and they simply cannot stand back up. In 2006, a British climber named David Sharp died this way, alone in a small rock alcove high on the north side, after his strength and his oxygen gave out on the descent. In 1998, Francis Arsentiev became the first American woman to reach the summit without bottled oxygen, but she collapsed on the way down and could not be saved, and her husband Sergei died searching for her. Then there are the traffic jams. In 2019, a photo went around the world showing a long line of climbers stuck on the summit ridge, waiting for hours in the death zone, burning oxygen and strength they could not spare. 11 people died on Everest that season, many of them worn down by exactly that kind of delay. Rescue here is close to impossible because a helpless climber in the death zone is often too heavy and too far for anyone to carry while barely surviving themselves. This slow, quiet collapse is one of the most common ways the mountain takes a life. Number 1, avalanches. And the single deadliest force on Everest is the one no climber can fight, outrun, or predict. When the snow above you decides to move, your skill and your fitness no longer matter. An avalanche is a slope of snow and ice that lets go all at once and pours downhill at the speed of a car, sometimes faster. There is no warning you can count on. By the time you hear it, it is usually already on top of you. If you are buried, the snow sets around you like concrete, and you have only minutes before the air runs out. The deadliest day in Everest's history came on April 25, 2015. A massive earthquake struck Nepal, and the shaking tore loose an avalanche that swept directly into base camp, the crowded tent city where climbers rest and prepare. At least 19 people were killed in moments, and many more were injured, in a place everyone had always treated as relatively safe. It was a disaster no one could have climbed their way out of. And this is not new. The very first climbers ever to die on Everest were killed by an avalanche. During the British expedition of 1922, 7 porters were swept to their deaths on the slopes of the North Col. Across the long history of the mountain, avalanches have claimed more lives than any other single cause. You can train for the cold, you can prepare for the thin air, but you cannot negotiate with a hillside of snow that has decided to fall. That is why it sits at number 1. So those are the deadliest ways Everest takes the people who try to climb it. From the quiet threats most of us never think about, all the way up to the wall of snow that nobody can escape. I would really like to know which one surprised you the most. Was it the danger hiding in the flat ground, or the way the body quietly falls apart near the top? Drop a comment and let me know, because I read them. And if you made it this far, think about subscribing, because there is a lot more survival, exploration, and disaster coming. I have got more stories from the most dangerous places on Earth lined up. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.